Welcome to Herbally Yours, an adventure into the world of natural medicine. Here is your host, Dr. Ellen Kamai, the natural nurse who will help you take the leap to ultimate wellness.
Greetings, and thank you for joining me, Ellen Kamai, the natural nurse, for another edition of Herbally Yours, right here on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC. Herbally Yours brings you the latest information about the many facets in the world of natural living. Today, we are so happy to have as our guest Mr. Faust Ruggiero. Faust is the author of the Fix Yourself Handbook. He has established a new and exciting counseling program for personal life enhancement. He's a published research author, clinical trainer, and a therapist who has worked in settings that have included clinics for deaf children, prisons, nursing homes, substance abuse centers, inpatient facilities, and as the president of the Community Psychological Center in Bangor, Pennsylvania. We'll be talking to Faust today about his program, and for more information, visit FaustRuggiero.com. Thank you so much for being our guest today, Faust.
Ellen, thanks so much for inviting me. I'm looking forward to a nice conversation.
Well, it looks like your history in this field goes very far back in time. Tell us how you got started.
You know, and I'm one of those people who really, this was a calling, I guess. I was the kid everybody came to school and talked to. I was the good listener and the guy with the ability to sort some things out. So it was a natural fit, and it just took me through college and graduate school and all the usual trainings we all go through. And here I am 4 decades later. But
it looks like, you know, from when I was reading what was going on with your history, that you worked in some places that would be considered, you know, rather challenging, such as in prisons and with disabled kind of individuals who might be having further challenges.
You know, I did. And a lot of that's by design. I mean, the opportunities were there, but I really wanted to get a diversified background because I think that those of us that counsel for a living, you know, the more we have to draw on, the more tools we have to help people get where they need to go. So all those early, those early encounters were by design.
So how did you get to choose the name, the Fix Yourself Handbook? Because I have to say, on my website at naturalnurse.com, the first thing I have there is your health is in your hands.
You know, I saw that and I said, What a nice fit. Because
right.
You try to preach that to people and most of us are doing it backward. We're trying to take in from what we're experiencing and then that's certainly a part of life. But really, we really have to take control over how we're working with all that information. So, you know, I try to tell people, you got to work from the inside. You got to be strong on the inside. And if you can do that, anything that comes along in your life is very doable.
And do you ever find that people feel like, you know, that's taking too hard a line, like these things that have happened to them? Of course, I deal with a lot of people in those situations. They often have something that, you know, might be called feeling like they are victims, which sometimes they are. You talk about children that are raised in difficult situations, you know, when they're not in a position of power. So, of course, they have consequences because of that perhaps is not within their realm of something that they had charge over.
You know, people will present that, and I've heard it many times, and my response is always, you know, let's say you're right, you were victimized. Horrible things may have happened in your life, but that doesn't negate the ability to move forward if you work from the inside. The stronger we are, the better we're going to deal with even those situations. Sometimes we have to backtrack. We have to go back and get some of that old stuff and get it in perspective. But regardless of, you know, all of us have had some type of victimization in our life. It may be, you know, something as simple as having something stolen from us, or maybe something where, you know, like kids are abused and human trafficking and those things. So there's a wide gamut there, but we're, you know, we all have to be strong, and the stronger we are, still the better we deal with those situations.
And I imagine that first step, and I've worked in a lot of centers such as rehab centers and with people who had trouble with various addictions, it's still that step. Like if you're talking about a 12-step program, one of those things that might help people, but it's still the one step of not doing it. And only you are in charge of that.
And that's what we're teaching. We're teaching to make good choices, and to do that, we've got to get ourselves to the point where we stop following the crowd. I call it keeping your mind on autopilot. We want to get off autopilot. We want to stop doing that. Learn how to make good decisions. Learn how to look at good information. Learn how to get our emotions and back them down a little bit so our brain can take over and do some fact finding. It's not real, none of this is new age, if you will. It's all stuff we've had inside us forever. We just have to go in and get it.
Well, what was your motivation for putting all these thoughts together and writing the Fix Yourself Handbook?
Well, I began working with all these things in my practice, and I started to realize that all these little processes we all have, learning how to be honest with ourselves and setting boundaries and defending those, and slowing down life so we can process information properly. All those kinds of things, they were all inside us, and I began to realize that it's one process at a time. And as I was working people through these processes, that's when they started to make most of the gains. So then I put that into a kind of a formal program. Let's start from the beginning. Let's get you off autopilot, and let's go through all the various steps. And I've got 52 processes there, and in the book I've got 26 chapters where I use all these processes to help people deal with different problems. And people were really responding well, far better than any traditional thing I was ever taught. So I thought, why don't I put this into the book and let's get it out there?
So people can do this completely on their own, or is there a website they work with you through the process, or is it strictly a, like you said, fix yourself kind of deal?
Yeah, it's the kind of thing that as I talk about it, and as I put in the forward in the beginning of the book, you can do this in conjunction with counseling. If you're one of those people that refuses to go to counseling, it's certainly going to be a good aid because it's set up like a counseling situation. If you've been through counseling, it's a great a reference to go back and get some things done. And the book itself is set up like a reference book. So if you kind of lose it a year from now and said, I'm people pleasing again, you can go back and in 3 or 4 pages reestablish what you need to do with all those exact steps. Because I like to give people the exact steps that they can use to move forward.
As we can see clearly in the table of contents, because I'm looking at your book, the Fix Yourself Handbook, so there's really very specific steps. I guess the first thing is that someone has to want to take control of their own life, that rather than reaching out and feeling victimized.
Yeah, believe it or not, it is a choice, and that's where it starts. If you're willing to say, all right, I'm not where I want to be, I'm willing to do the work to move forward. I'm going to take my time, and I'm going to, I have a whole life ahead of me. So why don't I just start doing this? It really works out really, really well. It's just being willing to get out, to get your hands dirty, if you will. And it's there's nothing I write. I don't think any good counselor says anything that can't be done. We just have to be willing to do it.
Well, you have a process called the processed way of life. Tell us about that.
That's all those processes I was talking about. There are things, again, that we all used to use these things, but we became people that process from the outside in as opposed to the inside out. And there's simply things like being honest with yourself, setting goals, again, slowing down life, getting that intellect to be stronger than the emotions. At least let's get it to the point where we can fact find and get our intellect working before we emote. Let's get things like gratitude and humility and faith and setting boundaries and learning how to defend those boundaries. I teach people how to set goals and go after them. There are all those processes that typically it's just it's a logical system to work that typically if we do this, it gives life a plan, put it that way. It gives life a plan so that we can follow it and just organize our life.
Well, you have one chapter called Disengaging Life's Unhealthy Routines. And that's a big step. I mean, first you'd have to recognize the unhealthy routines before you could disengage them.
Yeah, you know what you recognize first, though, and you recognize that you're not happy. That things aren't working out for you. There you are doing the same thing over and over again, and it doesn't work. And at that point, then comes the, what's going on? Why is this happening? Then you start to look and say, well, I'm doing this and I'm doing that. Now you can identify. I'm following the crowd doing this. I'm going after quick fixes. I'm staying in comfort zones that are toxic to me. I'm with people that aren't good for me. Well, now you can start identifying them. But that first little hint is that I'm really not happy. I'm getting up every day. Maybe I'm depressed. Maybe I'm anxious. Things just aren't going the way I think they should go, and I can do better in my life.
And recognizing that you can is very empowering.
Absolutely.
And there is a way out versus there's not a way out, which is, a big step. Mm-hmm. I always find it challenging, I have to say, which I would say interferes with my ability to help others who are struggling more. Because let's say with the whole process of addiction, I actually don't know what that feels like. And yet I can try anything and I can do it, enjoy it, and that's it. I'm not going to do it again and again. Like I'll do it, let's just have my day off, so I know it's not going to interfere with my job or paying bills. Or I really have trouble understanding about that tendency to keep doing something that doesn't work out well for you in the end.
And all of us who are not addicted, we say that. And what it is, substances, it's one thing. For the other things, we do them over and over again because it's a comfort zone. And, as I've told people, comfort zone doesn't always have to be full of pleasure. Sometimes it's just familiarity. It's not being challenged. And then we do them over and over again. And it becomes like an addictive behavior. We just keep plugging into it, and we know it's causing us pain, and we know it's causing us to lose things. But we keep on going forward because we know it. It's familiar with it, and change is, to some people, that's the monster, the world's monster to try to do something new.
Well, I'd like to remind our listeners that you're listening to Herbally Yours on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC. I'm Ellen Kamai, the natural nurse. And today, my guest is Faust Ruggiero, and he is the author of the Fix Yourself Handbook. And he has been working in the field of counseling and therapy and getting people to really understand that they can make better choices, and better choices lead to better outcomes and more happiness. And he is the author of the Fix Yourself Handbook. Now, what do you mean by brutal honesty, the real test of courage?
That's where everything starts on, I should say the second step. The first step after taking your life off autopilot is to say, okay, let me look at where I am and let me be honest with myself. And we all talk about being honest, we all think we are, until it gets a little uncomfortable. Then we start making excuses and we start using defenses. And, in the book, I liken it to peeling an onion. You take that first layer off, it's paper. It's nothing. It doesn't do anything. It's non-functional. It's really not even honesty. Go to the second layer, and now it starts to burn your eyes just a little bit. It smells. And you get to that third layer, and you want to put it down. And that's the way honesty works. We start getting uncomfortable, then we want to change gears a little bit. So when I say brutal honesty, I mean go in there and just deal with the facts. Because if you don't get the facts, you're not going anywhere. You can try to put a Band-Aid on it, but it'll keep on coming back. So you really want to get to the point that you're dealing with facts. And if they're a little uncomfortable, so be it. You're not telling the whole world what it is. You're just using that to make some changes. And if it hurts a little bit, you're going to get through it. Know that you are strong enough. You are powerful enough to get through it, but you've got to face it.
And I was once in, I guess it was a group therapy session at Cornell University. And what they did, when you talk about brutal, at one point, everyone in the therapy session had to actually take off all our clothes, and this was mixed, men and women, we were all in our 20s, I would say, be in a circle, and one person at a time went in the center of the circle, and everyone shouted out what their body language was telling about themselves. That's pretty brutal.
That's about as brutal as it gets, huh?
It was life-changing, I'll tell you.
I'm sure it was.
So we're not saying you have to go there, but that was through the Esalen Institute.
Mm-hmm.
It was really, really confrontational. But talk about taking those layers of self-defense away. And you had to face that brutal honesty. So you're saying, you're doing things like that, but more with your mind and for yourself.
Yeah, and the other thing I tell people is don't be afraid of doing that, because all that power you're talking about, you will develop it, but you're going to go in with that brutal honesty and find some things that aren't so good, but you're also going to find the beauty of yourself under all the garbage you've piled on top of it.
So when someone, let's say, is ready to take that kind of deep look about why things are not working for them in their life, and perhaps it's not all because someone else did something. Maybe some of it, at least, is because we either did or failed to do something. What's the first step? Do you talk about writing it down? How do you talk about beginning the process?
The first step in the process, again, really, is you make that decision. Then you can write things down. And I urge that to the people. Write down often I'll have them make a list when they come into counseling. And we'll say, let's just talk about where you are, the good things, the not so good things in your life. That initial list is almost always packed with negativity, with all the negative things. And, and then I slow them down and I say, well, let's take a step back and look at all the positive things. And when they do that, what they realize is that they've lumped a whole lot of the positives in their life with the negative, because they really trained themselves to think in negative terms. So we start making that list, and we grow that positive list a little bit bigger, and then we start attacking things, and we start putting things in perspective.
And you have to, the person themselves going through this, that's why it's called self-help. Now, what makes the Fix Yourself Handbook differ from other self-help books?
I did an exhaustive search before I started writing. And the thing I found about self-help books is they all had a few characteristics that were the same. First of all, and this really comes from the publishers, because this is what they demand. Let's keep it to one subject, or maybe two or three, but let's not get too broad. So that's the first thing. I've got 26 chapters of 26 different problems. That's very different. The second thing I found is that the way people are learning today is they're going fast. I tend to call it microwave learning, but they don't want all the wordiness, and sometimes you need it, but they're not learning that way as much as they used to. They're going for this, the old Reader's Digest version. So I made my chapters smaller. I listed the problem that we're going to deal with, like setting boundaries, and then I give 3 or 4 pages of a whole lot of facts and information about that. And then I go directly into what I think is missing in self-help, and that is the exact steps to do what you're supposed to do. I'm sure, we've heard love yourself forever, and I have never seen anyone say, this is the way you do it. So I said, let's put it out there. This is the way you do this. Here are the exact steps. If you do these, your life is going to get better as long as you keep on doing them.
What do you mean by I over ear? I over E. Brain power over emotional madness.
Right. Intellect over the emotion. I'm just asking people, we are emotional people. We tend to react quickly, and we lose the facts at that point. The emotions actually begin to dictate what the facts are going to look like, because I always say it's like the analogy I use is emotions are to us like a virus is to a computer. It just ruins the program. So I just tell people, we're not going to make you non-emotional people that you can't use your emotions, but slow down, get the facts first. Let's engage our brain. Let's bring that over our intellect, and then let's emote over what's healthy and what's factual. That's a much better way to live life. But we have a tendency to go the other way. We snap fast. We see something and we go into character, and that's always worked against us. I just want people to be able to get the right information and slow down and say, okay, what do I want to do here? Let me look at the information. Let me make some decisions that make sense. I need my brain for that.
And what do you mean by slowing down life's pace? Do you mean like on a daily level or in a broader space of time?
Daily level, really, and I don't mean physically go slower. I mean that would help. Obviously, we go so fast, but we're multitasking all over the place. We're giving small amounts of time to situations that need more time. We're not prioritizing correctly. We're making choices that are based on such small sample sizes of information because we don't give ourselves enough time to think. So I just want people to slow down enough to look at information. That's the key. Let's look at the information. And if we do that, the information always points in the direction of a solution. It may not be the one we want, but it will be the one that's right. So I just want people to slow down enough to process.
And how would one do that? How would one even recognize that they're sort of thinking really quickly or making snap decisions that might have been better to think out a little bit more?
I talk about in the book, I talk about the attributes that form a human being, the physical, emotional, intellectual, and spiritual. And what I always tell people is you're going to know if things aren't working well, because physically you're either going to be anxious, you're going to be tired, energy level goes, you're going to feel like just overwhelmed physically. Intellectually, your thoughts may be conflicted. You're not able to process information correctly. Emotionally, you'll know that you're just everything that's happening, you're reacting to rather than processing and responding. And then spiritually, there's that internal disconnect. So when you start feeling those kinds of things, you're off base. It's time maybe to do a few things.
So you have to tune into your own emotions as well as what's going on.
Absolutely.
And what do you mean by living in the moment, the practical application?
We have a tendency to go backward and forward. We go back to what happened and we get stuck in that, whether we're victimized or whatever it may be, or we're in the future. What if this is going to happen, or I'm anticipating this, or I can't wait till I get there for this. And that energy that we're expending to do that isn't going anywhere because those time frames don't exist yet, or they're gone. And I talk about energy management, getting your energy in the moment so you have all the resources, or at least as many as you can muster up to deal with any situation. That requires getting your energy in the moment you're breathing in. And so I like people to start looking at that, staying in that moment. This is where I'm breathing. Let me focus my energy there. It may be that I'm going to, the culmination of many days of that is going to bring me to something that I need in the future, but that's not here yet. So let's just stay in the moment and start working there. It's such an easier way to live life.
So, of course, at our present moment, if we're talking about moments in time, all of us are dealing with massive lifestyle changes due to the pandemic. And I think that has really increased things like feeling very alienated and depression and loneliness, as well as financial hardships. I think it's brought up a lot of challenges for many people.
It has. And, and there people go again and they're saying, okay, and I hear this all the time, what is the new normal? And I can't imagine why people are asking that question, because you're never going to find the new normal. That's not going to be defined for us. I tell people, create your own normal. And we're back to that, go inside yourself, start working with learn who you are, start getting familiar with that, empower yourself, make choices, and create the normal life that you want to have. Whatever's normal for you, but create it. Don't look for it.
Well, how would one begin to do that? What would the first step be?
Right where we started. Let's get life off autopilot. Let's get honest with ourselves. Let's start going inside and let's start fixing those things that maybe aren't working so well for us. The stronger we are inside, the more able we are to begin to create. And that's really where we want to go with life. So I always tell people, let's back down one step at a time, and let's get you off that hook you're on. That whole trending thing, that thing where, we got to stay in tune with the crowd, and when we're thinking that everything that's happening to us is because of something out there, environment's going to have its influence, but it doesn't mean it has to control us.
So with these kinds of patterns that you're discussing, I see, and I'm not sure I'm right, so I'd like to ask you as a professional in this field, do most people get better with age, and where we see those kind of patterns even more in younger and teenage people than in older people?
Yeah, a couple things happen as you get older. First of all, you're experienced enough. You've been through the wars that you begin to select the battles you want to fight. The energy isn't there to move it all over the place. The other thing is you have experience. You've learned how to process some information. When something comes up, you can see it. All right, if I do this, I already know it's going to go there because I've been there. I've done that. And that's why we always have that gap between the old and the young, where we say, hey, young people, don't do this because this is going to happen. And the young person does it anyway because they're going to go experience it for themselves. So yeah, as you get older, you mellow a little bit. You're a little wiser. And if you're willing to keep on learning, that makes it that much better.
Yeah, I think so. That was a lesson I always learned from my dad, who actually lived to 94, and until the very end, it was more like, okay, what new thing can I learn today? There was no end of that ever. What about the roles of things like humility and gratitude and faith?
Those are, as you get through the program, you can start to really realize those. When we talk about humility, and you just mentioned with your dad, it turned into a light bulb for me. This is what I do a chapter called the Arrogance Humility Paradigm. And what I'm talking about in there is really nothing more than remaining a student of life. We have a tendency to think when we've progressed a bit that we know it all, or we know a lot, and then we stop learning, or we decide that we know enough to get by. If you remain a student of life, if you're humble enough to learn from anyone, and you'll just take some time and process some of their information, you really, really can live an abundant life because you're constantly learning. There's a new challenge every day, and it feels good. You begin to get grateful about that. And the gratitude isn't about what was done for me and what I got. The gratitude starts inside me, and then it works outward, and it wraps itself around everything else. When we get to that point, we really see life changing because we're not expecting things, and we're not trying to control things, where things just happen in our lives, and we can see the gifts in those things. And that's, again, a very nice way to live life.
Well, I think that your book is something that most people could really use, especially if they're feeling that there needs to be some change. Think about how you yourself can help change things for you. And that's why it's called the Fix Yourself Handbook. Do you have any parting word of wisdom, Faust?
Again, we're back to that same thing. And I tell people all the time, you've got this all inside you. Stop looking outside of yourself. Look inside you. Decide that you're going to become a strong person on the inside so that whatever comes your way, you're going to be strong enough to deal with. The confidence, the empowerment that comes from that, again, it's just a wonderful way to live life.
Well, thank you so much for being our guest today on Herbally Yours. And we've been talking to Faust Ruggiero, the author of the Fix Yourself Handbook. Very easy to find. I looked at it on Amazon. It pops right up, and something that's really user-friendly and you may find very useful for yourself.
Thank you so much, Ellen. Okay. Have a wonderful day.
And thank you, listeners, for tuning into Herbally Yours, produced in the studios of 90.3 WHPC, Nassau Community College, Garden City, New York. For further information, email us at whpc@ncc.edu. This is your host, Ellen Kamai, at naturalnurse.com, inviting you to join us again next week for another edition of Herbally Yours. Until then, stay healthy.